Welcome to Parliamentary Conversations in the Commonwealth, a podcast by the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association that gives a voice to parliamentarians, civil society experts and activists across the Commonwealth to discuss common democratic challenges and share their ideas on what can be done to solve them. My name is Geoffrey Highland, and today we are speaking to two Commonwealth parliamentarians at the Parliament of Canada in Ottawa. First, we'll visit the Canadian House of Commons before we move to the Senate of Canada. So, first up is the Honourable Iqra Khalid, MP, a member of the House of Commons of Canada since 2015 and a Vice Chair of the CPA Canada Federal Branch. Born in Pakistan, she moved to Canada with her family at a young age and studied to be a lawyer. In Parliament, she's served as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue, as well as Vice Chair of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, Chair of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights, and a member of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts and the International Human Rights Subcommittee. She has also served on the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, as well as being chair of the Women's Caucus. A long-time resident of Erin Mills in Ontario, where her riding or constituency of Mississauga Erin Mills is based, Iqra Khalid has worked with the diverse local community to represent their needs. She was proud to have created the Erin Mills Women's Council, the first of its kind, to advise her on the issues facing women in her riding. Welcome to the CPA podcast, Honourable Iqra Khalid.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
So I understand that you were born in Pakistan before moving to Canada. Please can you tell us a bit about your experience of the Commonwealth, living and working in two different Commonwealth jurisdictions like Pakistan and Canada. When were you first aware of the Commonwealth?
Well, here's a fun fact about me. I actually grew up in Manchester, England. So born in Pakistan, my dad was doing his PhD in Manchester, so we all moved with him and then moved to Canada. So I think I've had a wide-ranging experience of what the Commonwealth is and what it represents in a lot of the world. So, now as vice chair, it's been quite a privilege to get to see the parliamentary issues that MPs, MNAs across the world face. So it's been quite a journey.
And when were you first aware of the Commonwealth as an institution?
Well, the Commonwealth. Well, when I became a parliamentarian is when I realized that there was an actual organized group of members of Parliament that were coming together from across the world to talk about issues that we all face, regardless of where we face them from, as they all have different lived experiences.
So the Commonwealth itself is facing many challenges and questions over its role in geopolitics and reconciling its modern role with its past history. How is the Commonwealth viewed today in Canada, and what do you see as the main role of the Commonwealth today?
Well, I feel that there's two different aspects of what the Commonwealth represents. There is an opportunity to build consensus, to collaborate, and to work on issues like modern slavery together, for example. But then there's the other aspect of colonialism and the countries that are part of the Commonwealth having faced a lot of those challenges, that discrimination within their local communities and then also at the international stage. I find that it's incumbent upon us to kind of build that consensus a little bit together. And to reconcile what has happened with a lot of Commonwealth countries in the past as well.
It's quite challenging, isn't it, sort of having that past and that future, but it's the more that we can look forward, I think, the better.
Exactly.
So let's turn to your own experience. How did you first get into politics and decide to seek election in your local community?
Ever since I've moved to Canada, I was 12, I've been trying to figure out how we can be such a diverse community, practice different religions, our neighbors don't look the same, we have different ideologies, etc., and yet we're still one of the most peaceful countries in the world. And 12-year-old me was thinking, why? And so I started to volunteer a lot, local food banks, at my library, teaching kids art at the Art Gallery of Ontario, at women's shelters, getting involved with different organizations, and trying to find an answer to that question. And I found myself volunteering for one of our colleagues with the Liberal Party in an election during university. And quite frankly, haven't looked back since. So for me, it wasn't, an active or proactive seeking out of an election or preparing myself that this is what I'm going to do. It was more of a continuation of using the platform to raise the issues of a community and to find the answer. How is Canada so peaceful? I think my working answer right now is that it doesn't just happen at the flip of a switch. We got to keep on working at it, building bridges with all levels of government, civil society, grassroots organizations, individual Canadians to continue to maintain that peace. And what we're seeing around the world more and more really helps me in reaffirming that resolve that I have, that it's about building bridges amongst everyone. That's why I do what I do. I don't consider it to be a job, to be honest. It's more of a lifestyle.
I think a lot of members of Parliament would say the same. So you've been a member of Parliament for some time now. So can you highlight some of the challenges and lessons you've learned from your time in the Canadian Parliament?
I think a lot of the challenges that I face are also faced by many MPs, and then I have additional challenges given just who I look like, what I represent in my community, and then to myself as well. As a young woman, and a young woman of color, one of the biggest questions that were asked of me when I was running for the first time back in 2015 was, well, you're so young, do you belong to Canada because you weren't born here? What's a woman going to do? Shouldn't you be focusing on getting married and having a family, etc.? And I think a lot of those stereotypes became not obstacles, I would say challenges to me in my journey in politics. And so I made it a point to ensure that what I'm fighting for is equality of opportunity for everybody. And I think that's what's really guided me over these past 10 years to continue to overcome the challenges towards equality of opportunity, whether it's based on the religion you practice, what you look like, what your gender is, and who you love, and just trying to find ways to build that equality for everybody.
And equal representation is so important across the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, through its Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians network, campaigns for equal representation of women in politics. Yet many parliaments around the Commonwealth still lack female representation. What do you think are the main barriers facing women coming into politics, and how can we overcome this?
Well, I mean, it depends on what part of the Commonwealth you're talking about. We're going from physical violence to character assassination to having difficulty in raising your hand to serve, having difficulty in raising money, for example. Women have a more difficult time in fundraising, which is a big part of who and how campaigns function. I here, even in Canada, I have faced violence myself. I've had about 11 death threats so far in this 10-year-long journey. And I think a lot of that is restrictive to women's involvement in Parliament. The other piece of it is just women naturally are the caregivers of a family dynamic. And so when parliaments are not family friendly, when you have to leave home for weeks and weeks at a time, leaving your family, your children, your sick parents, or what have you, it makes it a little bit more difficult for a woman to raise her hand to say, hey, I want to serve my community. And then there's the violence aspect of it as well. I was talking to a member of Parliament from Kenya a couple of years ago in one of these women's parliamentarian sessions, and she explained how because of one of her policy viewpoints, The opposition sent goons after her, destroyed her character, and also threatened physical violence, not just to herself, but to her family as well. So I think there's a wide range of barriers that women face. And you know what? That's why I really appreciate the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, is because you guys do build on how can we better have more equality of representation within our parliaments.
Absolutely, and I think it's about raising awareness of what women parliamentarians are facing as well. We know that women parliamentarians face some of the worst abuse in public life, particularly online. A recent CPA IPU report found, for example, that 60% of women MPs from the Asia Pacific had experienced online gender-based violence. So it's a problem that's right across our Commonwealth. Yeah. The use of social media can have both a positive and negative outcomes. However, we're increasingly aware of the negative effects of social media use on young people. And many Commonwealth jurisdictions have introduced legislation to restrict its use. Do you think social media has a place to play in society, and what role can parliamentarians play in this debate?
Well, I mean, as a parliamentarian who has lived a life without internet, watched the internet come about, and then watch it transform into the beast that it is right now, I understand the importance of using it as a tool to connect with my constituents. At the same time, it's kind of like an online anarchist society where rules and regulations are few and far between in terms of protection. 100% freedom of expression is a major part of democracy. It's one of the strongest pillars of our democracy. But creating a space where that freedom of expression is unlimited and then also controlled by private actors, as opposed to somebody that has public accountability associated with them, I think is creating a space that is unsafe for a lot of people. And whoever has the biggest following then can sway public opinion, whether it is true or not. Misinformation, disinformation, hate speech are being leveraged to create a more polarized space within not just the online sphere, because that then transferred into our lived realities in the physical world as well. I've been working on this issue actually for a number of years now, whether it's through the Justice Committee, through Ethics Committee, and trying to, and through the Women and Gender Equality Committee, to try to find out how can we regulate a little bit better so that, yes, absolutely protect freedom of expression, but maintain a safe space for the genuine exchange of ideas and the marketplace of ideas, which I think is what social media should be about.
And so many members of Parliament find social media a useful tool to connect with their constituents in their riding. Yeah. I'm sure you do the same.
I do. Yeah, and you know what? Like, you just because we've now transitioned post-COVID into a hybrid format. Now I find myself taking constituency meetings while I'm in Ottawa and taking Ottawa meetings while I'm in my constituency. It has definitely made life a lot easier and me more accessible to my constituents. And being able to attend a funeral of a loved one in my riding, for example, without having to vote here in Ottawa specifically. I can vote digitally as well. But then it also creates a strange situation where work-life balance is no longer a thing.
So one of the statistics that I love about the Commonwealth, and it amazes me every time, is that 60% of the Commonwealth's 2.7 billion population is aged under 30, which I think is staggering. How can the Commonwealth and parliamentarians engage more with young people? How can we encourage more young people, and in particular more young women, to participate in politics?
You know, our youngest member of Parliament is 23 years old here. She's a 4.5 foot, I'm exaggerating, she's really tiny brown girl. And I love her so much. Amandeep Sodhi, she is very close neighboring riding. Getting more and more young people involved in politics getting to run for office, and then also being involved behind the scenes as well in policy creation and analytics, etc., I think is a massive step that we need to take more and more across the Commonwealth. I'm seeing other countries doing it now. Had actually a conversation with representatives from Myanmar recently, where the young people have completely delegitimized the government of the day and have created a whole digital parliament from which they operate from. And there's tens of thousands of young people that are engaging with that space right now, because that's the kind of legitimacy they're looking for, the voice, the platform that they expect from a government. You know, when we say for the people, by the people, then when a population reflects 60%, we need to have our parliaments and our democracies showing and reflecting what our population looks like as well. So more and more youth engagement and involvement is very, very necessary.
And my final question today is what's the best piece of advice you've been given that you can share with us today?
Okay, a bit of a funny story actually. So I had just been elected and was looking to establish my office. And there was this one gentleman who I had wanted to hire, except he was a conservative from an opposing party. And he had worked in a conservative MP's office for about a decade before, government change, and now he was out of a job and looking. And so I called one of my senior colleagues and I asked him for advice. I said, hey, I like his talent, but trust is also a thing. What? And he said to me, and at that time I hated his advice. He said to me, Iqra, listen to your gut. And I thought he was just giving me vanilla advice at that time. It was like, oh, whatever, go do you. Like, don't bother me with this kind of stuff. But I actually did listen to my gut, and I ended up hiring him. He was one of the biggest assets in my community office for a very, very long time. And now I say that, the gut check, especially in politics, I think is so important. You know when something is off. You know when something is wrong. And you have to be able to distinguish between what your gut is saying versus what your fear is saying as well. And I think getting in touch with your gut is probably the best thing you can do for yourself, not just in a life of politics, but just being aware as to wherever you are. And it just helps you function more principally, in a more principled way. And also, you save yourself a lot of times when you listen to what you're really thinking.
Trust your instincts.
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Next, we move to the Senate of Canada, currently housed in an elegant former railway station in Ottawa, to speak to Senator Honourable Rosemary Moodie, a member of the Senate of Canada since 2018 and a Vice Chair of the CPA Canada Federal Branch. Senator Moodie is an independent senator representing the province of Ontario. She is Chair of the Standing Committee on Social Affairs, Science and Technology and sits on the Standing Committee on Internal Economy, Budgets and Administration, where she chairs the Subcommittee on Diversity. She is also co-chair of the Parliamentary Black Caucus and a past chair of the African Canadian Senators Group. Senator Moodie is a Jamaican-born paediatrician and neonatologist who holds both clinical teaching and practical roles in hospitals in Toronto. She has supported organisations in policy development to improve health equity and expand quality healthcare to the most vulnerable populations. Senator Moodie has also been a strong advocate for women and girls, contributing to campaigns to reduce social and health disparities amongst children and advocating for equal opportunity and inclusion. Welcome to the CPA podcast, Senator Moodie.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of your podcast.
So my first question today is that I understand you were born in Jamaica before moving to Canada. Please can you tell us about your experience of the Commonwealth, living and working in two different Commonwealth jurisdictions like Jamaica and Canada? When were you first aware of the Commonwealth?
Well, that's a good question. So let me start by telling you that growing up in Jamaica and moving to Canada, living in two jurisdictions, I found to be vastly different experiences in many ways, but really with echoes of similarity in both. And I like to think about it as if I'm relating to children's developmental stages, Jamaica being that young adolescent and Canada being the young adult in terms of their development and where they're at. Jamaica was, for me, a third world nation, a country steeped in its colonial history, attitudes, rules, laws inherited that they were working hard to shed. Rapidly growing and changing, a very vibrant, untamed culture, finding its own attitude, its own independence and its own identity, a melting pot of racial identities and different cultures. The echoes of the colonial past in Jamaica were very much present, very closely aligned to the British system. The education system still carried so many features. In my time growing up there, the school examination structure was closely aligned with the British system. The medical school I went to had up until shortly before I joined, been a college of the University of London. So very much present in my life growing up, the colonial past. What was different there was that in history classes we learned about slavery. We learned about the icons of freedom, the slave trade, Marcus Garvey, learned about and celebrated emancipation. And the history of all of this permeated our culture and our music, Bob Marley. As a young adult, I come to Canada, and yes, there were some recognizable echoes of some of the colonial past, really. I saw in this country a society, systems that were well developed, infrastructure in place, things like housing, healthcare, transportation, industrial development, all of those things very much in place and thriving. Changing, developing, quite different from Jamaica. And although there had been historical intersections along the way with the slave trade and other moments in time, they had influenced these countries very differently. And so I was now living in a very different place. The biggest thing that I probably saw and felt that was different were the opportunities that were available. Opportunities for people in need, opportunities for youth, opportunities for me personally. I mean, I was able to advance my ongoing education. I describe coming to Canada as my world exploded, it expanded. My personal growth felt limitless here. And I could do anything and I could move anywhere in this space. You asked the question of when did I really become aware of the Commonwealth? Well, in school you learned the history, you learned the facts, the role of the British Empire and colonialism, you learned all of that. But when I first encountered the Commonwealth of Nations and that coalition of 56 countries, member states that come together in a meaningful fashion to support each other, to share knowledge and to advance democracies, was when I was doing my regional work in Jamaica, working to establish regional healthcare systems across the Caribbean. And that's when we first realized the value of this extended family, this group the connections, the shared knowledge, the areas where we could collaborate, reach out, get information. And that was probably when it became real. It came alive for me. And that was well before I came to Canada. So that's when I first became aware of the Commonwealth, but as I look at things now and I reflect backwards, frankly, both experiences, growing up in Jamaica and living in Canada, have given me community, they've given me knowledge, they've given me opportunity. And every day I draw on these in the work I do in the Senate.
It's wonderful to hear that perspective of those two countries that have played such an important role in the Commonwealth. So the Commonwealth today is facing many challenges and questions over its role in geopolitics and reconciling its modern role with its past history. How is the Commonwealth viewed today in Canada, and what do you see as the main role of the Commonwealth today?
So Canada really recognizes the Commonwealth. We are partners with the Commonwealth and the 56 countries. In fact, we're probably the second largest donor to the Commonwealth right now. I think last year, about between 2025 to 2026, we donated 13 million to organizations. And that recognizes and reflects our support as a country for the Commonwealth that we see as a platform for diplomacy and for multilateralism. The United Nations Secretary General Amina Mohammed talked about multilateralism as needing to play a major role in addressing global challenges. She's talked about it concerning climate change and conflicts, and pointed out to us something I strongly believe, that no country, no matter how powerful, can tackle these crises alone. So multilateralism is not just necessary, it is going to be part of our way forward, to quote her. But it's facing growing challenges. And so the Commonwealth itself, our coalition of the willing, if you will, can provide a framework. It can provide diplomatic structures for strengthening multilateral cooperation and increasing stability, increasing the rule of law, recognizing the role of law and respect for democratic principles. And I think as we talk and reflect on, this new idea about building middle powers, finding coalitions around important areas like trade and so on, we will increasingly lean heavily on our Commonwealth friendships.
And that stability is so important, as you say, in the world today.
Yes.
Now, reflecting on your background as a medical practitioner, as a paediatrician and neonatologist, how did these roles inform your current role as a senator?
So, as a pediatrician, as a physician, I was deeply influenced by that work, that training. It helped me understand. I work with families, children, some of the most vulnerable times in their lives, in their experiences. And it taught me to approach every decision, every people with compassion, with using evidence to derive the best possible course, and a strong sense of responsibility. It helped make me become an advocate for the vulnerable, for the children, for poor, who can't do what the rest of us are able to do. It made me responsible to try and move gender barriers for women and girls, to advocate for equity, it made me responsible to bring that voice of the vulnerable forward. And so when I came to the Senate, all of that fit, because this was the role of the Senate, the upper house here in Canada. I did apply not only my concrete knowledge and experience in healthcare, but some of this learning and some of the way it shaped how I thought and how I made decisions came forward as well. We were just, I'll give you an example, we were just doing some of the legislation not too long ago that looked at the Connected Care for Canadians Act, the sharing of Canadian personal medical information. And I was able to bring to this discussion tangible experience on how we, people not being able to share, not being able to have that knowledge, at your fingertips when you present at a point of care affects the outcomes of patients and families. And when I think about, in the other sense, what do I bring to the Senate? I bring a certain way of thinking, a certain way of reaching decisions, working through the critical analysis of a problem. I tend to always place data and evidence at the forefront of everything. If it's not there, then we resort to what's the best principle that guides us here. And so I take a very disciplined approach to the work I do, and it's really born on and based on my training. I tend to use a political lens less. But that does not mean that I don't appreciate the importance of politics in the environment in which I work with. Obviously, it's present and it's very much a part of things. But I tend to lean back on what do I know here, what evidence do I have, or what is the principle at stake here. And that is what guides me and tends to guide me more so than the political nuance.
And sometimes people feel that they can share their personal stories with politicians in the same way that they might share with their physicians, I suppose.
Well, I get all kinds of stories from everybody in this environment. I learn lots of personal things from my colleagues, from people come to visit and talk to us.
Absolutely.
I guess it's the way you're trained. It's the way you're trained to make people comfortable.
So you've been in the Senate for a while now, so can you highlight some of the challenges and lessons that you've learned from your time in the Canadian Senate? Are there any best practices, do you think, other Commonwealth parliaments could learn from your legislature?
So the first part of it is going to make you laugh. I was an intensive care specialist, and decisions I made, I acted, and I saw the results immediately, and often in many cases. So the pace of bringing decisions and policy to completion, to seeing the outcome, was so slow, and I moved at such a different pace when I came here that it was a huge challenge for me. The laid-back attitude of the work and how much work we were doing. My days were full, they were day and night work. I seemed to have a lot of time all of a sudden. And so that was a challenge. I had to redefine success. I had to redefine and adjust to my expectations on timelines. Call that a frustration, if you will. The other thing that was another frustration for me was the influence of politics on decision-making in this setting. But I'm a quick learner, so I began to look for the impact. Where is the impact of politics on what we're doing here? And trying to carve out an acceptable place where there's that recognition, that understanding, but not necessarily capitulating to what I've analyzed and what I've realized. And so living with that reality, paying attention to it when it was important, but still trying to follow my principles. So that was an adjustment in how I would operate. I also learned, one of the important things I learned was you can't really do it alone here. You really have to build relationships. You really have to build coalitions, share, trust, and respect each other. You have to accept differences in people, in perspective, and in approaches. And you need communication. You need the best communication skills you can muster. You need them in this setting. And finally, you need to just be guided by your principles that will help your the Canadians that we serve understand your credibility, trust in you as a leader in their country. So what are some of the best practices that I've seen and met in the Senate? And these I'm going to specifically reflect on the changes that occurred through the new Senate that developed under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's new approach to choosing and selecting senators and appointing them. So we did formalize certain things, like how we chose our speaker, the deputy speaker, Speaker pro tempore. That was just a good act, an act of good governance. It had been done as tradition, but here we were now formalizing it and making it clear how this proceeds and how it will unfold, and predictably over time what to expect. There are a number of more important things, like proactive disclosure of our expenditures and contracts, and so that the public is able to assess what we do and how we do it and what we're spending on it, where their money, their investment in government is going. I think too, as part of that, the establishment of the Standing Committee on Audit and Oversight was important, because that does looks at the internal and external audits that are being done and understanding if all is well, if you will, on the financial front. Personally and as an organization, we have taken steps to combat disinformation through proactive public communications, through working with digital media in a very purposeful way. And I think that setting ourselves a standard, which has really always been the code of conduct and the ethics, conflict of interest standards that exist for us as senators, guided by an independent Senate ethics officer who is appointed as a nonpartisan officer of the Senate, all help to build trust, to be clear about our intent, to be honorable in the face of Canadians. In terms of youth, we have an interesting communications group called Cengage, which really works to engage young people, to connect us directly with them, and to promote civic education and that is important in growing our connection to youth. And so those are some of the good practices that I've seen since coming here. The other thing that I think we have opportunity to work on, frankly, is formalizing the youth voice in our parliamentary process. So I think that including youth in all committee deliberations, the youth voice of whatever arm of civil society that it affects should be something that we quite deliberately do. And especially since we just had a piece of, not too long ago, a piece of legislation that was a Senate public bill, a private bill. The senator was Senator McFedrin, and she brought forward a bill to lower the voting age to 16 from 18, and that failed, unfortunately, by 3 votes in the Senate. But things like that will certainly give youth a parliamentary voice, and it's something that we missed an opportunity there, in my view.
Thank you for sharing those. I think they're important lessons that we can learn from what's been taking place here in Canada. Now, the work of parliaments across the world is as important as ever, but we continue to face a trust deficit, with many citizens questioning the role of legislatures and the work of their parliamentarians. How can we ensure that parliaments are trusted to be at the forefront of democracy and representation, as well as being accountable to their citizens?
Building trust and accountability in parliamentary democracies does really require that we, as a collective, as an institution, make sure that we have strong ethical standards that are consistent, that are transparent, and that we engage our citizens appropriately so that they understand what we're doing and how we're doing it, and the rules that guide us. It essentially is good governance, and we know this. It is actually something that we work on we've dedicated our work in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association to doing in a benchmarks project. So in fact, it really does resonate beyond our own parliament into the affiliation that we have as a Commonwealth. What we will do with taking these approaches is foster trust and accountability, both of which I think we need. And there are some examples of how we can do this. Combating disinformation, we talked about a little before, through proactive public communications, engaging with digital media, so that we're a voice that's combating the disinformation out there. The establishment of this Audit and Oversight Committee as well, and other things like the Senate Ethics Officer. We were just talking a little bit about those things. Proactive disclosures, engaging with specific groups. Within our society, the vulnerable groups that we represent that don't have a voice, we actually need to quite deliberately engage them so that they understand and we understand what they want as well. So although we have a strong we're legislators and that's our main role, we have something of an advocacy role to support particular groups of people. And I think that work in an organized fashion is going to build trust. And we need to work on that. The Canadian Senate has been source of a lot of discussion for and against over the years. And I think we see that challenge and take it seriously.
And I think the more that citizens can see that advocacy role, the more value that they will give to the work of Parliament,
Yes,
won't they?
yes, I would agree with that.
So the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, through its Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians network, campaigns for equal representation of women in politics. Yet many parliaments around the Commonwealth still lack female representation. What are the main barriers facing women coming into politics here in Canada, and how can we overcome this?
So we know from a couple of studies, recent studies over the past, let's say, decade, that tell us a little bit about what's happening in terms of women and why they're not engaging in politics. I think the House of Commons Standing Committee did a study on the status of women, barriers facing women in politics. For those who want to look it up, it's called Elect Her, a Roadmap for Improving the Representation of Women in Canadian Politics. And what they found were that there were barriers at the level of the recruitment stage based on things like sexism and bias, barriers around the nomination and election processes, and the biggest one there was around financing. Barriers presenting full and equal participation in legislations, and that really related more to the conditions of work, the lack of gender-sensitive and family-friendly facilities that were not present in our somewhat archaic parliamentary process. And over the years, a lot of work has gone into possible solutions, addressing the gender-biased media treatment of women politicians, government funding for organizations and projects aimed at providing relevant training, exposure, internships in political workplaces so that women can become more comfortable. Some of the financial solutions, financial incentives for parties to nominate more women as candidates was recommended, and gathering data to better identify ongoing barriers. So to not just understand it at point in time, but moving forward to keep an eye on it and monitor what was working and what was not. And when you looked at the factors that would discourage women, the biggest ones were financial incentives, were government financial support and for mentorship and government funding for projects that really enhanced and promoted women's female engagement in politics. So once we understood that, that's where our focus has been. In the two houses, we see very different results. You've heard me talk about this before. In the Senate, we have gender parity, and through quite, I believe, a deliberate appointment process, we've maintained that over the years, despite the fact that senators reached the age of retirement at 75 and so are constantly leaving. We're reappointing senators and being sensitive to gender. It's a different story on the House of Commons side. Although there's been an improvement, I think the numbers are still low, at and around the mid to high 30s%. And I think that is reflective of more work that's needed. That ongoing understanding of what's working and what's not working. And perhaps having conversations with our colleagues and friends, other democracies, other parliaments that are doing a really good job might help us.
We know that women parliamentarians also face some of the worst abuse in public life, particularly online. A recent CPA IPU report found, for example, that 60% of women MPs from the Asia Pacific had experienced online gender-based violence. What have been your experiences as a woman in a parliamentary role?
So I'll share my experience and that of my friends and colleagues. I've actually been spared to a large degree. I'm very much aware of the examples of how we are subject to abuse, attack, how we're vilified. Social media has not been our friend. And so that is one way that I think that if you were to monitor, and you monitor closely, I don't think anybody is spared. I recently have been part of the Medical Assistance in Dying Committee, where we're reviewing the legislation at this point in time to decide on the future of that legislation. And obviously, it has come to the fore for me. And that's a sort of thing. That's a real problem. Recently, my colleague had death threats. We have in the Senate means and technology that screens the intake of messages, and it was identified through that mechanism. And it is interesting how real it was. A woman not terribly far from here, sitting in her office, sent a death threat. And it was considered to be quite serious. So we live it. It's part of our everyday activity. I'm not sure that we can control that. I and other senators, female senators, other female politicians, interact with our public, with Canadians directly. And when we're sitting with them, people behave differently than when they're behind a click of a button and you have no idea. Their anonymity is protected and they can do and say what they wish. And so it tends to be much more vicious and unfettered. And that's something that I'm not sure how we control that. Individuals can decide to pay attention to it or not. I don't. My staff laugh at me all the time. I don't want to know. And if I don't know, it won't influence what I say and do in my work.
And that's the difficult challenge, I think, that many parliamentarians face is, do you shut that noise out, or do you pay attention to it? And also you don't want to put in any barriers between you and the citizens that you represent.
Come and talk to me.
Yes, yes.
And tell me what you feel.
Yeah, and not
but
really
don't send me a message.
Yes, absolutely. So your various roles, including as past chair of the African Canadian Senators Group, has taken you to visit a number of parliaments across the Commonwealth. What are your impressions of the legislatures that you have visited?
So I visit in that to a lesser extent in that capacity, but certainly as a member of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, have travelled across many legislatures, and I can tell you they're as different as they possibly could be across the Commonwealth. Not just in terms of size, not just in terms of how much time they spend in session, their balance, their across representative political parties, the age of some of their institutions, the storied histories of their parliaments, and the incredible roles that many have played in the histories of their country. They're as different as they possibly could be. The Commonwealth Partnership, with what it offers legislators, however, brings us all together, because I think that it will become one of the most important organizations for us if we can, as we move forward, now moving from a charitable organization to becoming more potentially politically active. I think that we have an opportunity to become significant for our members in terms of supporting alliances based on democratic principles, based on trade goals, based on enshrinement of human rights, based on building influence amongst the middle powers, and how those middle powers can align with the membership in regions, for example. So I think that we have an opportunity together to strengthen us in times of global challenges that are often insurmountable for individual countries.
One of those opportunities is with the young population of the Commonwealth, and one of the most standout statistics is that 60% of the Commonwealth's 2.7 billion population is aged under 30. How can the Commonwealth and parliamentarians engage with more young people, and how can we encourage more young people, and particularly more young women, to participate in politics?
So, yes, I would agree with what you just said in terms of the statistics, and that also draws to the attention of the report by the Interparliamentary Union, which identified several obstacles as well to greater youth participation in politics. Economic barriers, particularly significant cost to running electoral campaigns that stand in the way for youth. Institutional and legal barriers, minimum ages. Ours in the Senate is 30 years. Something that probably isn't unreasonable, but it's there. Requirements of elected office that exceed the voting age in many countries. Social barriers, such as the perceptions that young people lack experience or responsibility necessary for public office. We have some initiatives, some Canadian initiatives that foster youth engagement in politics, and I can name a few for you. Parliamentary and internship programs, such as the Parliamentary internship programs. We're looking to develop an internship program specifically for Indigenous youth, that's in progress right now. The use of digital outreach and engagement tools to connect the younger audience and to promote democracy and engagement. The use of civic education tools, the parliamentary learning tools that we have. Learn About the Parliament webpage allows us Cengage, some of my staff members were part of youth senates and other things where, we actually take you into the chamber and mock debates are held and so on. So it is something that brings it to life, makes it real for youth. We obviously welcome visitors to the Senate, but this takes it a step further, where youth are actually engaged in activities that mirror what they can come and watch in the gallery, but they're themselves putting themselves in the position. So I think that there are a number of opportunities that we can, and again, I'll get back to looking at the voting age, as something that is an endorsement for youth, that they are responsible, that we acknowledge that, but we've yet to reach there.
And my final question today is, what's the best piece of advice you've been given that you can share with us today?
That one is tough, because people are really willing and very, very welcome with their advice. Probably the most important one was the advice that that I heard from many. Be true to yourself. At the end of the day, you have to carry your principles forward, and that is what matters. When you walk away, that's the best piece of your legacy that you can possibly build. And that's the way I've set my goals for my time here.
Thank you to Honourable Iqra Khalid, MP, and Senator Honourable Rosemary Moodie from Canada for joining this CPA podcast today, and thank you to you, the listener. We hope that you have enjoyed the conversation as much as we have. Listen to the CPA podcast via the CPA website, on the CPA YouTube channel, or find Parliamentary Conversations in the Commonwealth on your favourite podcast platform.